Hey, Josh, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Juliana. How are you?
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
How are we doing is the
Not
question.
well. No, we're not doing well. Not doing too well.
So, just for people who are just tuning in, I have several audience members who don't like to follow the news because it's too disturbing.
I also don't like to follow the news. They're smart
Yes,
audience members.
exactly. I try to, on this show, we try to give
It's my
news
job.
with a
I
little,
have to do it. Yeah.
well, we try to give the news with a little levity and humor and
I've been
also
trying to make my
commiseration.
show not be too depressing, and I've just been failing at it. It's an aspiration.
No, I love your show.
I aspire to not making it too.
Your show liberates the id because when you talk, it's exactly how we all feel. And you're like, oh, thank God, I'm not the only one fighting complete depression and annihilation. But anyway, tell me, what are your thoughts about what happened? I mean, we lost the governor's race in Virginia. That was kind of the big
we did
marquee loss, I guess.
That was the marquee loss. There were a lot of very depressing losses. I thought that, New Jersey was a frightening one in that it was a lot closer than it should have been. I personally thought that India Walton's loss in Buffalo to a write-in candidate who she had beaten in the primary was a major disappointment.
Yeah. Major, because she's a Democratic socialist. Buffalo's a working class town.
Yeah,
was,
Buffalo
kind of a highlight.
Buffalo is a weird town because it's very, very conservative. It's got that kind of like, white Catholic conservative Democratic base rather than.
I'm from Syracuse. It's like 3 hours down the Erie Canal from Buffalo. They have a highway now. We don't have to take the canal, but it's the same deal. Like they got Sinclair Media all up in there. There's, right-wing talking points sprinkled into what was once your local media channel with the same familiar faces that you know and love covering the New York State Fair. Now also talking about, whatever, that labor sucks, that whatever the talking points may be. So it's a propagandist's wet dream if you're on the right, and getting a corporate Democrat back in that seat is, a
little demoralizing. So, I mean, I think that it is correct that, this portends badly for 2022, right? We're probably going to see Dems take severe losses in the midterms next year. I don't have a fatalistic view towards that, though, because I do want to point out, and I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish, but I do want to kind of point out that this election happened at the worst possible time. This is not only following months of intra-party wrangling over the Dems agenda. And we should absolutely thank Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema for their help in making this difficult, in making Democratic-based voters think, oh, well, there's been a lot of noise and frustration, but we haven't gotten any progress. It's also at the tail end of a big wave of COVID. This is just, it's a very, very bad time.
It frustrates me that everyone
party in power, right?
It frustrates me. It is. And it frustrates me that, if we look to the things Donald Trump was doing, he was toying with dropping a bomb on Iran, according to Joseph Giuliani, in order to keep his power. So, we're way ahead of where we would be if he was here, if he was in. So it's very frustrating to be like, well, when Joe Biden gets in, we expect some major turn.
I mean, this is the thing. There's so much focus. As Democrats, we face this kind of double whammy. When we lose, we have to then deal with days of punditry, beating up the left, and just this maddening, facile punditry. It drives me absolutely bonkers. And by the way, I'm leaving town. I'm going to go. I'm going out of town in 2 days, and I'm going to be offline for a week. No,
but you've already recorded your. We've got issues.
I've recorded this week's, but next week we're going to have a guest host.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. I'm not going to have internet, and I'm not going to have cell service.
And you're going to remember what life is like without propaganda coming at you.
So I'm sorry. Let me just. So the reason that I am not fatalistic, is that a lot can change in a year. And that should be a lesson that we take away. A year ago, Democrats were triumphant. This has been a year later. Things are not looking so great for the party. Next year, it is entirely possible that COVID will be behind us at this point in November. When we hit the next midterms, it is entirely possible that we'll have a really strong economy. And then there's another important point here, which is that Glenn Youngkin managed to keep Trump bottled up during this whole campaign. And next year, during the midterms,
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, Trump was out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. He kept him at arm's distance. And what happens in this country is that the party in power terrifies the party that's out of power, the base voters from the party that's out of power, and they are motivated to vote. The base of the party that's in power is like, we kind of got this. It might not be great, but
and they don't come.
I'm not terrified, so I'll just sit home. Next year, Trump is probably going to endorse a slate of candidates who are like him, and maybe too right-wing for their districts and states. And he's going to evaluate them primarily on their loyalty to him and his crackpot conspiracy theories. Yes. And then he's going to go out on the stump, and he's going to do a series of campaign events and Nuremberg rallies like he always does. And he's going to go and he's going to be on the stage with all of these people, and we'll see. I mean, right now, the possibility of Trump coming back as president in 2024 is distant.
Well, meaning that when he comes up and stumps for these people, that is going to scare the base enough, the Democratic base, to get off their heinies and actually get back out and vote in the midterm. Is that what we're talking about here?
I mean, we're not predicting that, but I'm saying that I think that's a distinct possibility.
Yes.
I that is my hope, and it's why I do not think that the Democrats are doomed, right? Let's say they get their shit together and pass these two infrastructure bills. So then they have things that they're delivering on promises. COVID is contained, schools are open, and here's Donald Trump railing about the things that Donald Trump rails about. I think that you could have a very different picture next year.
I hope so, and I would think you're right if we were in a sane world, but we've got propagandists, and then we have uber propagandists, and then we have insanists. The QAnon people, I saw some of them at the voting place. They did not take kindly to my being polite.
Oh boy.
I guess it was my RBG mask, or my mask at all. Whatever. Anyway.
I mean, they're just sore because JFK didn't show up this week. So.
Is that what was supposed to happen? I seem to have lost.
I think they're mad about that.
But so the Republicans, not to get way ahead of ourselves, but the Republicans may not run Trump, but they're going to run Trump light, like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis or some other Trump nut.
Greg Abbott, yeah.
Or someone who really supports the Republican Party, like Joe Manchin. They're going to run somebody who everyone can get behind because he's not Trump, but he still has the same corporatist, fascist, anti-woman, anti-immigrant, you name it, agenda. Are we going to be able to beat a not Trump?
Well, I mean, that is the big question. I mean, Youngkin was a not Trump in a way, in that he ran a really nakedly race baiting campaign around this so-called critical race theory. So he appealed to Trump's base in a smart way, while also reassuring, nice white suburban right-leaning, voters that he wasn't like Trump. So I think that's it's a hard campaign to pull off. It's hard to execute that. We should give him credit for doing a pretty good job. I don't want to give him credit because I think the nature of his appeal was so disgusting, right? I mean, this is the race baiting was over the top.
Terry McAuliffe just had his finger he's just so regular. He's been in office for a while. He's just a regular Democrat, and we are in irregular times. And I feel like that whole thing he said about he doesn't believe parents should be telling schools what they should teach. He could have easily said something that didn't just feed the right wing. He could have said, well, I believe educational best practices should be what we go on when we're educating our children. That doesn't mean keep the parents out. It just was like, he seemed unaware. And what do you make of, it seems like we're going to have to go more Bernie in order to beat someone who's going to be a Trump light. I don't think we should do what the Democrats always do, which is be like, well, we're very akin to these Republicans. We're still, it's unfortunate that someone a little more progressive didn't run in Washington, or excuse me, in Virginia.
McAuliffe is a really uninspiring candidate. He is easy to rail against as kind of a machine or establishment candidate. He's close to the Clintons. I don't think it's an ideological problem.
In my mind, he was the same guy who was running as the vice for Hillary Clinton, whose name I can't remember, but they're like one and the same.
Tim Kaine. Yeah, they're basically interchangeable white guys. They are.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean.
Yeah, no. But I don't think it's. I don't think that there's some magic formula with being more ideological more to the left ideologically. I think that there's a big cultural divide on the broad left within the Democratic coalition between people who want to kind of like, oh, we're feeling squishy about this race baiting. Let's ignore it, or let's just say CRT isn't something that's taught in schools. And another maybe younger group of Dems who are saying we need to call this out as what it is, which is an effort to divide people by making up right-wing racist propaganda, basically. So I think that there's no question that Democrats need to figure out a way to respond to this stuff forcefully and not be on their heels all the time. And that's really the big issue. And I have to say, then we also have to acknowledge the structural asymmetry here, which is that they have, Republicans are, first of all, they have a sprawling propaganda network from Fox News, top-rated cable news TV and cable news station in the country, all the way down to, the blogosphere. And they're also very top-down with their messaging. So they said, okay, we're all going to talk about critical race theory. And then you see people talking about critical race theory and you ask them, oh, what is it? And they're like, I don't know. I was just told I need to hate it. It is. Bad. And you get that at all levels. You get that from the rank and file. I mean, there's people on the street who are like, yeah, this is the big problem. I hate critical race theory. And they don't have any idea what it is.
I just had this conversation about, my husband had a conversation with one of his family members who was like, well, what about the debt? Well, what about critical race theory? Well, what about this? And what about Antifa? And his head almost exploded. And then he said, do you even know what Antifa is? He said, your father was Antifa. He fought fascists in the Second World War. Your, father-in-law, Antifa. It was like, just like how many. It's a lot of talking points coming, and they're mad. It's talking points.
They are mad, and they're scared.
Ignorance. Yeah.
They're mad and they're scared, and they think that somebody's taking stuff away from them.
Well, things are kind of scary. I mean, we're about to talk about COP26.
Yeah.
Things are scary. And
they're not scared about the stuff that are scary, though, right? I mean, they're not. They don't think that the historic pandemic was really a big deal. They don't think climate change is a problem. Yes, they don't think sliding into authoritarianism is a problem.
No, they want that, all the things that we worry about. Mexicans can stay south of the border. Like they're fine with authoritarianism. Yeah, you're right. Their boogeymen aren't the actual thing. And then the other thing that bothers me is the fact that the Democrats so much, there's still too big of a percentage that is way beholden to corporate interest and just like slide it. Okay, our second story is COP26. We might as well use that as a slide in.
Okay, segue. Good job.
We're going to segue. We're segue. COP26, everyone knows in Copenhagen, they're doing a meeting at the UN to discuss how they're going to make everybody feel like they're doing something for climate change, but it's going to be too little.
When they're not.
Did I get that?
Yeah. You got that exactly right. So I'm not a huge expert on this. I have been following it. It seems like the theme of this whole meeting is feel good, long-term commitments that are fuzzy. And it is clearly not meeting the urgency of the crisis that we're facing right now.
I've
not
got
down the road.
Yeah, really, right now. And the last, the last COP, I guess it was 25, they basically did very little except say, oh, we're going to, it was that one was notable only for delaying any action until this year's conference. Yeah. And so like Joe Biden's there, he promised to make some big promises, but he himself has not delivered on many of his promises on climate. Like, he said he's going to advance environmental justice, and then he didn't act, and he's refusing to act on new oil pipelines, the Line 3 one, the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I don't believe that this conference is going to provide any serious solutions. I have an image here. We're going to put, Phil is producing for us today. We're going to pull it up. There's a story, I'm forgetting which news outlet it was. CEO Climate Alliance to world leaders. We support you in taking decisive action. Bezos said he's going to give $2 million, which we're going to talk about with Professor Wolf after this. But, decisive climate action would actually, in my opinion, would actually be having to change the system that brought us these problems in the first place. The fossil fuel industry, 91% of global industrial greenhouse emissions and 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are, this is insane. So we need to do something like make those companies responsive to democracy. And I don't want to scare people by saying having them like be a worker co-op, you know what I mean? Something a little bit beyond what these people there are just promising more of the same by saying, well, we're going to keep capitalism and I'm going to stay a billionaire and I'm going to fly off to space. And then I'm going to say, when I look down from space, I noticed that the earth is fragile. Who knew?
Yeah.
And now I'm giving $2 billion, which is a fucking pittance, of an amount.
I mean, I think a lot of people who are urging climate action have been trying for years and years and years to simply get a widespread acknowledgement that the costs of inaction are massive and they dwarf any kind of costs that are associated with taking action. If we don't do something, it is going to be massively disruptive. No, let me rephrase that. If we don't do things that are commensurate with the challenge, if we don't act very quickly in a very bold way, the costs, the economic costs, the social costs are going to be. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. There have been studies. The CPCC has put out studies about with a range of economic consequences of inaction over various time frames, and it's startling how costly it will be if we don't get it together. And it's all a race, right? At some point, this is going to become undeniable, and the question is whether that will be before or after we reach a tipping point.
Greta Thunberg is speaking today. Al Gore is speaking today. Thunberg actually said something pretty funny. Apparently, she got dinged by the press for swearing as she was chanting some anti-corporate. Exactly.
Give me a break.
Thank you. I mean, the world is burning, and
pearl clutching. I cannot deal with pearl clutching right now.
Thank you very much. And I really hope that pearl clutching was not from the left. I'm afraid that it was, but I don't know who swears more. Probably the left.
I don't know. I don't know. That's true.
It's hard to know, but it
is hard to know.
It's just disgusting that's what the big main story was for Greta Thunberg. And I do want to point out that there is a lot, as you can see in our images here, there are actually lots of protests going on, people making their voices heard all across the place. And I think one of the things that could actually come from this is what I was reading about and that really made sense to me, is the fact that, since I think it was about 2018, there was a peak in climate activism, and then it's kind of gone downhill from there and slightly gone underground during the whole pandemic, other than the bright spots of, looking at the sky and saying, hey, people aren't traveling as much. I can actually see the blue. Remember that during the pandemic? That was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But there, activism has sprung up across Europe and across the globe around this. And I think it might be a turning point for climate activism to kind of get together with labor. And I'm hoping for this, and I'm giving words to this, but I do see those two communities coming together and, instead of being at odds, which is how the mainstream media here in the US portrays them.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, I love having people on who say, yes, that's right. That's really why I have people on. Make good points and say, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're
Josh
correct.
Holland, thank you so much for joining us. Final story today, which I couldn't wait to discuss. David Chase finally came out and actually said that the ending of The Sopranos is what you feared. Tony Soprano was killed in that restaurant. Have you heard this?
I did not see this, but that's what I thought. I mean, it seemed pretty clear. I remember watching the finale, and I thought, okay, well, they spared us the gore, but this is obviously what happened. It seemed.
I know clear. It was almost worse because in my mind, I'm okay. So I'm an Italian. What am I? An American of Italian descent. So I can. We were not in the mob. Thank you very much. But I can relate to some of the way people talk to each other and the sort of cultural things. And so the intense love of the Italian children. I'm sure other children love their parents too. But this like operatic sense of love. So when that blanked out, it was so distressingly heartbreaking for me because he's like sitting there with his family. Right. So I just went into denial and was like, no, that didn't happen. Oh, you just don't know. You just don't know. He could have gone on.
It could have just, maybe something came up.
I mean, they could do it. They did that prequel, which I really enjoyed, The Many Saints of Newark. Maybe they could do a postquel about how, Meadow went on to become like the capo, activist. That would have been awesome. Yeah, a female capo.
Yeah.
We just made, oh my God, we just made the next movie.
That would be a good one. I'd watch it.
Damn. All right, Josh, what's coming up on the podcast this week before you go off?
Well, we're going to do we're doing a recap of the election. I would love to not talk about the election this week, but it's a political podcast. I didn't think I had a choice. So we talk about that with Paul Waldman from the Washington Post. And then we are joined by Will Bunch from the Philly Inquirer to talk about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial.
When are you going to have me on your show to talk about other things that we don't talk about?
Let's do that. Let's do it the week. Let's do it the week after I get back.
You're like, let's do it the week I'm off. I won't be there to talk to you.
Let's do it the very week that I get back.
Josh Holland, thank you so much. I always enjoy your takes and you complimenting me on the program. No,
Julianna, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot. Have a great trip.
Thank you.